Started.
Yeah, we're interviewing Tosh McDonald about the ASLEF strike and the picket line that's here in Doncaster today. Tosh, can you tell us briefly what the strike's about?
Yeah, basically this strike's about two things. It's about pay and the breaching of the conditions that we have with our members, the way they're rostered to work trains. That's been going on for a long period of time. 5 years ago, when the economy took a nosedive, DB Schenker started losing a lot of contracts and we had problems with our members facing redundancy. The management shed over 1,000 train drivers' jobs throughout the country. We even put drivers on reduced hours contracts to keep more drivers in work. Now as things have started to pick up, we don't have enough drivers, so forcing our members to work, or trying to kid our members into working beyond the hours that they should do, making them work extra. We've been getting by from crisis to crisis by getting our members to come in and work the days off. They've stopped working the days off about 4 weeks ago now, and the company's now trying to blame our members for putting contracts in jeopardy. The contracts are in jeopardy because DB Schenker do not utilise their employees properly and the resources properly. Basically, they're taking on contracts without the drivers there, enough drivers. They need to recruit more drivers to actually fulfil the contracts that DB Schenker are bidding for.
Yeah, on what you're describing is a pretty chaotic situation. A lot of people can't really understand how the railways are organised these days. Do you think that the private sector is doing a good job? I mean, in the light of the Richard Branson losing his franchise for, was it West Coast Trains?
West Coast Railways, yeah. How it's organised is probably a contradiction in terms, because it doesn't seem to be organised. The problem is it's just not organised on the railway. On the passenger side, where we see franchises coming up and being re-let to different companies, they always have to be the same companies. Part of the criteria is they have to have experience in running a rail franchise to bid. So it's a real gravy train where you have to be in the club. You have to be in the club to be able to bid for more of them. Now, with such as the West Coast franchise, there's a lot of public outcry about the fact that Richard Branson and Virgin, which has this fluffy image, have lost that franchise. But half the franchise was owned by Stagecoach and Brian Souter, which doesn't have such a good image, and nobody's shouting out about that. First Group have won the franchise, and yet when you look what First Group have done on First Great Western, another main line, they run the franchise for so long while they were receiving money from the government. As it got towards the end of the franchise, when it's their turn to start paying money back into the coffers, they said they couldn't afford to, threw the keys back with no penalty to them. In fact, opposite to a penalty, the government then give them a contract, the Department for Transport then pay them to run the franchise for them that they've handed the keys back into. It's a mad situation.
So the private sector is really milking the taxpayer, not giving value for money. It's refusing to honour its commitments to pay back to the taxpayer, and the taxpayer is losing out. Do you think that there's a case to be made for renationalising the rail, or do you think that's a sort of pipe dream of the left?
No, it's the only sensible way forward. Actually, next week we've got at the TUC conference, we have an emergency motion being raised at the TUC from both the RMT and ASLEF, talking about renationalising the railway. It's talking about the problems with the West Coast franchise, where it's been handed now to First Group, the problems First Group have had in the other franchises. National Express, another one that threw the East Coast keys back because it was costing them, they weren't making enough money, so then somebody else gets paid to run it for them. And what this emergency resolution is asking for, it's asking for the railways to be taken back. It's to ask, first of all, East Coast, which is in public ownership right now, to keep it there, to put West Coast into public ownership, and also all the other franchises that come to an end to keep them in public ownership. And that's at no cost to the taxpayer. There's no compensation to pay out to anybody or anything. Let the franchises run the course and just take them all back, keep them in the public sector. We found with Connex South Central, when that was taken back, took back into public sector, and it actually was more efficient, it was more punctual, and it was more...
Tosh, want some beer?
No thanks, Pat. And the...
Sorry, edit that. Cool.
And the punctuality, everything, the staff morale, everything was higher. It was much better, and it was run under public ownership. We had put the case several times to the last government, to the Labour government, that we argued that we were often accused of dogma, you know, saying that nationalisation is just all we wanted to go for, we're opposed to privatisation. And what we asked was to give us a franchise to run in the public sector as a comparator to the private sector franchises, and let's see which is actually the most efficient. But it seems it's actually the ideology and dogma being followed that privatisation's good. You know, all private is good, all public is bad. That's the dogma that's following.
So basically, they just have to win that argument about privatisation good, nationalisation bad at all. Because I mean, I was going to ask you, is Ed Miliband listening to you, Tosh?
Well, Ed Miliband and the Labour Party are listening to us, and what we find with Maria Eagle also is listening to us. And a lot of what we've been putting forward as our policies, we're expecting to see in the next Labour government's Labour Party's next manifesto for election. Now, once they get into power, and I hope they do get into power and get rid of this horrible Con-Dem government that's in there, then it will be up to us to keep pressure on them. And I think that's something we've done in the past when we've had Labour governments, is we've actually not kept the pressure on them that we should have done. We've supported, given blind loyalty sometimes, and not asked for the loyalty back in return from that government.
So could you look at Ed Miliband and say to him, listen Ed, nationalise the railways, it's a vote winner. It could be one of the key parts in winning the next election. Is that right?
Absolutely, and it is, and twice has been voted for at Labour Party conference, and is actually the Labour Party policy. We have unfortunately had a Labour government last time who didn't fulfil that policy, but the Labour Party conference has made it policy twice now.
It's the last question, Tosh. How confident are you that this strike's going to win?
I'm 100% confident. It already is winning, where our members are now feeling that it's time they're able to push back against an employer. And you have to remember, this is an employer, Deutsche Bahn, it's a German state railway, and they're the biggest employer of ASLEF members. Now, whether it be in Deutsche Bahn, which was the former EWS freight operator, whether it be in the Tyne and Wear Metro, whether it be in cross-country trains, Arriva Trains Wales, all owned by Deutsche Bahn now. Biggest employer of our members. And when they're producing in their internal publications, they're making statements like their British rail holdings are helping to subsidise the German taxpayer. At the same time telling us we have to have below inflation pay rises. We had a half inflation pay rise last year for our members and a pay freeze the year before. Our members are confident that we can get back. It's time now to say it's our turn now. We deserve to at least keep pace with inflation. And I really believe we can get that extra money. And also, we have now seen that management can't manage without overtime. And our members are not working the days off. The days off are becoming what they should be. Days off to rest and make sure they're safe to come back and drive trains refreshed after a break.
Thanks very much, Tosh, and we wish you every success.
Cheers.